The day began like any other in the alien village. The sun hung low in the sky, a pale red light covering the dusty streets. Children played near the wooden huts, their laughter soft and innocent. But the peace did not last. From far away, the sound of heavy boots broke the morning silence. Slow, steady, dangerous. Every step echoed across the valley. The villagers froze. Mothers grabbed their children and pulled them close. Old men whispered, in fear. They all knew what the sound meant. The soldiers had returned. The ground shook as the soldiers marched into the village. Their armor was dark and cold, reflecting the dying light. Each one carried a long weapon, sharp and deadly. The villagers lowered their heads. No one dared to speak. No one dared to resist. At the front stood the commander, tall and cruel, his eyes like stone. He raised his hand, and the soldiers stopped. The silence was heavy, pressing on every heart. Then, with a voice that cut through the air, the commander spoke. "Bring the children." A whisper of fear ran through the crowd. The villagers had heard these words before. Every time it ended in pain. Mothers clutched their little ones tighter. Fathers looked down in shame, powerless to fight. The soldiers stepped forward, pulling children from their homes. Cries filled the air. Small hands reached out for parents who could not help. One by one, the children were pushed into a line. Their eyes were wide with fear, tears rolling down their cheeks, and then the commander pointed. That one. A soldier grabbed a tiny girl no more than 3 years old. Her hair was soft and dark, her small face trembling with fear. She did not understand why strange hands pulled her away from her sister. Her legs kicked, her little voice cried out, but no one came to help. The villagers lowered their eyes. No one dared to move. To resist was death. Everyone knew it, everyone feared it. But then a voice rose above the silence. "Don't take her." The words came sharp and desperate. The crowd gasped, heads turned. A young alien girl, her skin pale, blue, pushed through the people. Her eyes were bright with tears, her body shaking but her heart strong. She rushed to her little sister and grabbed her arm. "She's just 3," the girl cried. Her voice broke as she spoke, but she held on tight. "She's only a child, please don't take her." The soldier pulled the small girl harder, but the older sister refused to let go. She clung to her with all her strength. Tears ran down her cheeks and her voice grew louder, desperate. "Please, don't take her. She's all I have." The crowd remained silent. No one stepped forward. Fear chained them all to the ground. Some turned their heads, unable to watch. Others closed their eyes, wishing it would end. The commander's lips curled into a cruel smile. He enjoyed the sound of the girls crying. He enjoyed the silence of the people. "Remove her," he ordered. 2 soldiers stepped forward. One pushed the older sister to the ground. She hit the dirt hard, dust rising around her. She tried to get up, but a soldier's boot pressed against her back, holding her down. Still, her hand reached out, fingers clawing at the air. "Don't take her. She's only 3, she screamed again, her voice breaking. The younger child sobbed, reaching back for her sister as she was pulled away. Her small hands stretched out, but they never touched. The villagers stood like statues. Not a single one moved. Not a single one dared. Fear was stronger than love. Fear was stronger than mercy. But then, something changed. At the edge of the crowd, a figure stirred. A shadow moved against the light. Slow, steady, strong. A man stepped forward. He was human. The villagers gasped. Their eyes widened. A human in their village? Few had ever seen one, and those who had remembered only stories. Stories of power, of anger, of fire. The man was tall, his face marked with scars of old battles. His hair was dark, streaked with gray, and his eyes burned with a fire that no soldier's armor could match. He wore a long, worn coat, the edges torn, but his steps were steady, unshaken. The soldiers paused, surprised. The commander narrowed his eyes, and the older sister, lying in the dirt, lifted her head. Her eyes met the human's, and for a moment, she felt hope. The man did not speak. He simply kept walking, his boots kicking up dust. Every step was slow, deliberate, like thunder rolling across the ground. The soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons. The commander raised his hand, but the man did not stop. He stopped only when he reached the child. He bent down, his shadow covering her, and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then he stood tall, facing the soldiers. His scarred face was calm, but his eyes burned like fire. For the first time that day, the village breathed. Someone had stepped forward. Someone had dared. And the soldiers did not laugh. They felt something new, something dangerous, something human. The village stood frozen. Dust floated in the air where the human now stood, tall and silent between the frightened child and the armored soldiers. His presence was like a storm, quiet but powerful, and every villager felt the weight of it. The commander frowned. His cold eyes narrowed as he looked at the stranger. "A human," he muttered, his voice dripping with disgust. "Why do you interfere? This is not your concern." The man did not answer. His silence was louder than words. His hand rested on the little girl's shoulder, steady and protective. She clung to his coat with tiny, trembling fingers, her sobs quieting as if she sensed safety for the first time. The older sister, still on the ground, forced herself to rise. Her knees were scraped, her arms shaking, but her eyes shone with new hope. She looked at the man with disbelief. No one had ever stepped forward before. No one had ever dared to stand against the soldiers. But now, a human did. "Please," the girl whispered, her voice trembling as she faced the commander again. "Don't take her. She's only 3. She doesn't even understand why you want her. She's innocent." The soldiers laughed. Their cruel voices cut through the air, mocking her tears. One leaned closer to the commander. "Look at her, begging like a child herself. Should we silence her?" The commander raised his hand to quiet them. He studied the human. "You protect these creatures?" he asked coldly. "They are nothing, weak, helpless. Why would a human lower himself to save them?" Still, the man said nothing. His eyes never left the soldiers. His jaw tightened, his face carved with determination. The older sister's voice rose again. Her words cracked with pain, but she refused to stop. "She's my sister. She is all I have. Take me if you must, but let her live. Please, she's only a baby." Her plea echoed through the crowd, but the villagers stayed silent. Fear held them in chains, locking their feet to the ground and their voices in their throats. Some turned away, ashamed. Others lowered their heads, pretending not to hear. The commander sneered. "A touching plea," he said, "but worthless. The order is clear. The child goes with us." At his signal, 2 soldiers stepped forward again, their heavy boots pounded the dirt. The little girl whimpered and pressed herself closer to the human's leg. But this time the soldiers hesitated. They saw the human's eyes. They felt the weight of his presence. Something about him was different, dangerous. The older sister's tears streamed down her face. She stepped forward again, though her body shook with fear. Her voice was louder now, filled with desperation. "Don't take her, she is only 3, please, she has done nothing." Her cry cracked the silence like lightning, and for the first time, some villagers stirred, eyes lifted, heads turned. A murmur passed through the crowd. Her courage touched something deep inside them, something they thought was lost. The commander noticed the shift. His glare hardened. He pointed at the human. "Remove him!" The soldiers gripped their weapons. Tighter. The air grew heavy, thick with tension. The villagers held their breath. Everyone knew what was about to happen. But before the soldiers could move, the human finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, and powerful. "She stays." Just 2 words, yet they carried the weight of thunder. The soldiers paused, uncertain. The commander's lips twisted into a cruel smile. Bold words, he said, but words do not stop steel. The human did not flinch. His hand stayed on the child's shoulder, steady, unshaken, his eyes locked on the commander's, unblinking. The older sister's heart pounded. She had never seen such strength, not in muscle, but in spirit. This man, this human, stood like a wall against an entire army. The commander snapped his fingers. The soldiers began to move, circling the human like wolves around prey. Their weapons gleamed under the dim sun. The villagers gasped, but still did not act. Fear chained them. They prayed silently, hoping for a miracle, yet too afraid to be part of it. The little girl cried softly, her face hidden in the folds of the human's coat. The older sister stood beside him now, trembling but unwilling to leave. She looked up at him, her voice small but steady. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. The man did not look at her. His eyes stayed on the soldiers. But his answer was simple. Because no one else will. The word struck her heart like fire. For the first time, she believed they might not be alone. The soldiers closed in. The commander's cruel smile widened. "Then you will fall with them." The human straightened, his body tense, ready. His scars told stories of battles long past, of fights he had already survived. And now, in this small village before these terrified people, he was ready to fight again. The older sister clutched her sister's hand tightly. Her voice, though weak, rose once more. "She's just 3, she whispered. "Please." The air grew silent. Again. The villagers' eyes burned with shame. The soldiers' weapons gleamed closer, and the human stood unshaken, a shield of flesh and will. The first soldier stepped forward. The crowd gasped, and the fight was about to begin. The air in the village was heavy, as if even the sky held its breath. Dust swirled around the humans, boots. Soldiers tightened their circle, weapons raised, their eyes sharp with cruelty. Yet the human stood calm, his face unreadable, his presence unshaken. The commander lifted his chin, his voice cut the silence like a blade. "You dare stand against us? Alone?" The human did not answer. His silence was his weapon. He looked at the frightened child hiding behind him, then at her sister, trembling but defiant at his side. His eyes softened for only a moment before returning to steel. The villagers watched in awe. Never had anyone stood against the soldiers. They had lived in fear for so long that resistance felt impossible. But now here was a man, human, scarred, and unafraid. Something stirred inside them, a feeling they had almost forgotten. Hope. One. Soldier stepped closer, sneering. His voice was loud and mocking. "Move aside, human, this child is ours." The man raised his head slowly, his gaze sharp as fire. His words came low and heavy, carrying across the silent crowd. "She stays." The soldier's grin faded. He hesitated, as if those 2 words carried more weight than he expected. He tightened his grip on his weapon. The commander, annoyed by the hesitation, gave a sharp signal. "Take him down." The soldiers surged forward. The villagers gasped, some covering their mouths, others closing their eyes. None expected what happened next. The human moved, not with panic, not with fear. His motion was calm, sharp, and controlled. His hand shot out, grabbing the first soldier's wrist. With a sudden twist, the weapon clattered to the ground. A heavy kick sent the soldier sprawling in the dust. The second soldier lunged, swinging his blade. The human ducked, stepped inside the arc, and struck with his elbow. Bone cracked. The soldier cried out, stumbling backward. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. They had never seen anyone fight like this. The human was not wild or reckless. He fought with precision, every strike calculated, every step steady. The commander's face darkened. "Kill him," he roared. 3 more soldiers rushed in. The human turned, his coat sweeping with the movement, his eyes cold and focused. He caught one soldier by the collar, slammed him into another, then spun, driving a fist into the third's chest. The man fell to the ground, gasping for air. The little girl peeked out from behind him, her tears mixing with wonder. Her sister stared in disbelief. This was no ordinary man. Still, the soldiers did not stop. They regrouped, circling tighter. Their laughter was gone now, replaced with caution. They had expected an easy fight, a broken man daring too much. Instead, they faced a storm. The commander stepped forward, fury in his voice. "Enough," he barked. "Do you think one man can save them all? Do you think your kind makes you stronger than us?" The human's chest rose and fell slowly. He was breathing hard, but his eyes remained steady. He spoke at last, his voice quiet, but cutting through the commander's rage. "Strength is not in numbers. It is in will." The words echoed across the village. The soldiers stiffened, uncertain. The villagers stirred, their fear trembling into something else. The commander's sneer returned. He raised his weapon, pointing it at the human. "Then your will shall break." The soldiers advanced again. This time the fight was harder. The human blocked one strike, countered another, but a blade scraped across his arm, leaving blood. He winced, but did not fall. Another soldier slammed into him, but he pushed back, his strength fueled not by power alone but by determination. The older sister cried out, reaching toward him, "Please stop!" But her voice could not break the violence. The little girl hid her face, but even through her sobs she felt it. The man would not leave her. Blades clashed, fists struck, dust rose. The human fought like a wall against a storm. Every time he was pushed back, he stood again. Every strike he took, he returned, with greater force. The commander watched, his anger boiling. This was not just defiance. This was something dangerous. This was something that could inspire. And he saw it, the villagers' eyes. Fear was no longer the only thing there. Hope flickered, faint but alive. The commander raised his voice, filled with fury. "He is only one man. Watch him fall." But the villagers did not look away. They watched every strike, every stand, every moment the human refused to yield. The older sister's voice rose again, breaking through the chaos. "Don't take her, she's just 3, please." Her cry carried over the fight, over the dust and the blades. And in that moment the human struck once more, knocking a soldier to the ground. His body was bleeding, his breath heavy, but his spirit unbroken. He stood tall, his coat torn, his face marked with blood and dust. Yet his eyes still burned, and his presence still held. The crowd was silent, stunned. The soldiers hesitated, glancing at one another. For the first time, doubt crept into their hearts. The commander's face twisted with rage. This was no ordinary fight. This was the beginning of something greater, and the villagers knew it too. A single human had done what none of them dared. He had stood, and he had not fallen. The dust of the fight still hung in the air. The human stood at the center of it, chest rising and falling, blood streaking his arm, coat torn at the edges. Around him soldiers groaned where they had fallen, but many more still stood. Their weapons gleamed under the fading light, their faces twisted in rage and fear. The villagers stared in silence, their hearts pounded. None of them had ever seen such defiance. One man, a stranger, had fought against the commander's soldiers, and he had not fallen. For the first time in years, the villagers felt something stir inside them. Not safety, not peace, but the spark of courage. The commander's voice cut through the air, sharp as a blade. "Do not stop, finish him, break him before they think he matters." The soldiers roared and surged forward. Boots thundered against the ground. Dust rose once again. The human stepped forward, his body tired but his will unbroken. He raised his hands ready for the storm. The little girl pressed her face against his leg, sobbing quietly, while her sister pulled her close, whispering promises she could not keep. The first soldier swung his blade. The human ducked low, sweeping his leg beneath the soldier's feet. The man crashed to the ground. Another soldier lunged from behind, but the human twisted, grabbing his arm and snapping it against his knee. The scream echoed across the village. The villagers gasped. Some clutched their chests, others leaned forward, their fear warring with, the human moved like water, calm, precise, unstoppable. But even water could break stone when it never stopped flowing. A soldier's strike tore across his shoulder. Blood stained his coat, but he did not cry out. His jaw tightened, his eyes burned brighter. He struck back with his fist, the sound of bone cracking under his knuckles. The older sister could not look away. Her heart pounded with fear, but also with something else, something she had never felt before. She whispered softly, as if her words might carry strength to him. "Please, don't fall." The commander stepped forward now, his patience gone. His face was dark with fury. "Enough games," he growled. "Kill him!" 4 soldiers charged, together a wall of steel and armor. Their blades flashed, their boots pounded. The human braced himself. The first blade struck, grazing his side. Pain flared, but he turned with it, grabbing the soldier's wrist and pulling him into another's strike. Sparks flew as steel met steel. The third soldier swung, but the human ducked low, ramming his shoulder into the man's chest. The fourth tried to stab, but the human caught the blade with his bare hand, blood spilling as he twisted it free. The villagers cried out. They had never seen such madness. They had never seen such strength. The soldiers fell back, groaning, some clutching, their wounds, others gasping for breath. The human stood again, blood dripping from his hand, his body trembling but his spirit unshaken. The commander's eyes burned with rage. He knew this could not go on. Every moment the human stood, every breath he took, the villagers grew less afraid. If they saw one man resist, they might believe they could resist too. He pointed his weapon at the human, his voice thundered, "You are nothing. You will die, and they will forget you." The human's eyes narrowed. His voice was calm, steady, unshaken. "If I fall, they will remember why." The words struck the villagers like fire. They trembled. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others clenched their fists. For years they had bowed in silence. For years they had given away their children. And now one man, one outsider, stood for what they could not. The commander snarled and raised his hand. "Crush him!" The soldiers advanced again, slower now, their eyes cautious. They had felt his strength, tasted his fury, but they outnumbered him. Dozens against one. Even the strongest wall could break. The human stood tall, his shadow stretching long in the dying light. He wiped the blood from his hand, his breath steady. His eyes did not leave the soldiers. Behind him, the little girl held her sister tightly, her tears falling silently. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some looked at the human and felt pride. Others looked at their commander and felt shame. But still, they did not move. Fear chained them tighter than steel. The soldiers circled. The air grew heavy. The ground shook with every step. The older sister cried out again, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, she's just 3. Don't take her." The commander laughed. "Your words are nothing." But they were not nothing, not anymore. Her plea carried weight because now there was someone standing beside her, someone proving that resistance was possible. The villagers shifted uneasily. Their silence was breaking. Their hearts pounded with the question, if one man can stand, why can't we? The human glanced at the crowd for the first time. His eyes burned, not with anger, but with a challenge. His silence spoke louder than words. "Will you let fear rule you forever?" The soldiers charged again. Dust exploded into the air. The clash began anew. The villagers held their breath, their hearts beating like drums. The fight was not yet over, and, for the first time, they wondered if it might not end the way the commander believed. The air cracked with the sound of steel against steel. Dust filled the village square, rising in choking clouds as the soldiers swarmed like wolves. At the center stood the human, tired, bleeding, but unbroken. His eyes blazed with fire, his body moved with purpose. The villagers could hardly breathe. They had never seen such a fight. For years they had lived as shadows, bowing their heads, giving their children away to soldiers who never returned. But now, one man fought back, and he did not fall. A soldier swung down with a heavy blade. The human stepped aside, the strike slamming into the dirt. With a twist of his wrist, he disarmed the soldier and struck him across the jaw. The man crumpled to the ground. Another soldier lunged from behind. The human spun, coat sweeping wide, and caught the man's arm mid-strike. With brutal precision, he slammed his elbow into the soldier's ribs. The crack echoed. The soldier dropped to his knees, gasping. The crowd gasped. Mothers clutched their children tighter, torn between terror and awe. Old men whispered prayers. Young ones watched with wide eyes, their hearts pounding with something new, something that felt like fire in their veins. The commander's voice roared through the chaos. "Do not hold back! Kill him! Kill the human!" 5 soldiers advanced together, forming a wall of blades. They moved as one, trained and ruthless. The human stood still, blood dripping down his arm, chest heaving. He waited. The first soldier struck. The human blocked with his forearm, grimacing as steel tore flesh, but he pushed forward, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest. The second came from the side. The human ducked low, swept his leg, and the soldier crashed to the ground. But the third blade cut deep into his coat, grazing his ribs. Blood spread dark across the fabric. The villagers cried out in fear, but the human only clenched his jaw and struck back, fists flying, each blow fueled by something deeper than strength. Will. The fourth soldier tried to pin him. The human twisted, grabbing the man's weapon, and pulling him forward into the fifth. Their blades clashed, sparks flying, and the human shoved them both back with a roar. The ground was littered with groaning soldiers. Yet more stood ready, circling him like predators. The older sister stood at the edge of the fight, clutching her little sibling. Her voice rose above the chaos, desperate and trembling. "Please don't take her. She's just 3. Her plea cut through the noise like lightning. The soldiers paused for a heartbeat. The villagers stirred. Their hearts ached at her words. They had all lost children. They had all stayed silent. The commander snarled, fury twisting his face. He pointed at the human. "You fight alone, you bleed alone, and you will die alone." The human turned his head slightly, his eyes flicking toward the villagers. His voice came low, steady, unshaken. "No one stands alone, unless you choose to." The words burned into their hearts. For the first time, many could not look away. Fathers clenched their fists. Mothers held their children tighter, not in fear, but in defiance. Old men wiped their eyes. The soldiers attacked again. The human met them head-on. He was slower now, his movements heavy with exhaustion, but his strikes still landed true. A fist to the jaw, a knee to the stomach, a headbutt that sent one soldier reeling. But he took blows too. A blade cut across his thigh. A fist slammed into his ribs. His body shook with pain, but his will stood firm. He would not fall. The villagers whispered. The words spread like fire. He is only one man. Yet he fights them all. Why not us? Why not now? The older sister's voice rose again, sharp and strong. "She's only 3. Please help her." This time her cry broke something. A man in the crowd stepped forward. His hands shook, but he moved. Then another. Then a third. The soldiers glanced back nervously, sensing the shift. The commander barked orders. "Stay back. Anyone who moves will be punished." But the villagers no longer lowered their heads, their eyes burned, their fists clenched. For the first time they looked at the soldiers not with fear, but with anger. The human stood tall despite the blood dripping down his side. His voice thundered across the square. "They are many, but they are not endless. They rule only because you kneel." The villagers trembled. Some stepped forward, others held back, torn between fear and courage. The commander roared in fury. "Silence him!" The soldiers rushed again. Blades flashed. The human fought, striking with everything left in him. His knuckles split. His chest heaved. His coat was torn and stained red. Still, he stood. Still, he fought. The little girl sobbed quietly, hiding her face in her sister's arms. But the older one stared, her heart burning. She whispered through her tears, "He is not alone. He cannot be." The fight raged on. Dust, blood, steel, and cries filled the square. The human's body was breaking, but his will was not. And with every strike, every breath, every stand, he planted something in the hearts of the villagers. Not just hope. Defiance. The battle had begun. The village square had become a storm of dust and blood. Soldiers pressed in from all sides, their blades flashing, their boots striking the ground like thunder. At the center stood the human, his coat torn, his body marked with wounds, yet still he refused to fall. Every breath he drew was heavy, but every strike he made shook the crowd. The villagers watched in silence, hearts pounding. They had seen men fight before, but never like this. He was not fighting only for himself. He was fighting for the little girl, for her sister, for every child they had lost. And for a moment it felt as if he was fighting for them all. The commander's voice cracked through the chaos. Break him. Crush this fool before they start to believe. The soldiers surged again. A blade slashed across the human's shoulder. He stumbled but stood firm. Another soldier swung low. The man blocked with his arm, blood running down to his hand. His face twisted with pain, but his eyes did not dim. He struck back, sending the soldier reeling. The little girl clung to her sister, sobbing. The older sister's eyes filled with tears as she screamed again, her voice sharp and desperate. Please, she's only 3. Don't take her. Her cry tore through the square. This time it did not fall into silence. This time it sparked something. An old man in the crowd stepped forward. His back was bent with age, his hands trembling. Yet his voice was steady. She is right. Another villager followed. A father, his jaw clenched, his fists shaking. No. More, he said. Not again. The commander's eyes widened, his grip tightened on his weapon. He roared, Stay back, all of you. Anyone who moves will die. But the crowd no longer lowered their heads. Mothers pulled their children behind them, standing tall. Young men clenched their fists. Even those who shook with fear felt something, stronger rise inside them. The human fought on, his body failing but his spirit roaring. He struck, blocked, bled, and stood again. His voice thundered between strikes. They take your children because you let them. They rule because you kneel. The villagers trembled. The truth stung, but it also freed them. For years they had lived as shadows. For years they had obeyed. And now one man, a stranger, showed them what they could be. The older sister looked at the villagers with wild, desperate eyes. Help him, please, she cried. He cannot fight alone. And then it happened. One villager moved. A farmer with rough hands and a tired face. He grabbed a stone from the ground and hurled it at a soldier. The rock struck the man's helmet with a clang. The soldier staggered back in shock. Another villager followed, then another. Stones flew through the air, sticks, tools, whatever they could grab. The soldiers snarled, caught off guard as the crowd turned from silent to furious. The commander's face twisted with rage. Stop them. Cut them down. The soldiers tried to turn their blades on the villagers, but the human struck again, forcing them back. He moved like a shield, his body bleeding, his strength fading, but his will unshaken. The villagers surged forward, shouting, crying, fighting. A woman swung a wooden staff into a soldier's side. A boy barely older than 15 tackled another's legs. The square exploded with chaos as fear gave way to fury. The soldiers, once so confident, faltered. They had numbers, they had weapons. But now the crowd was no longer a crowd. It was a force. The commander bellowed, his voice shaking with fury. They are nothing. Break them. But his words no longer carried power. The villagers did not stop. Their voices rose louder, their courage stronger. The air trembled with their shouts. The human stood tall in the middle of it all, bloodied but unbroken. He met the commander's gaze. His voice carried like thunder. You cannot stop them now. The fear is gone. The commander's face darkened. For the first time, a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. The older sister held her sibling close, tears streaming down her face. But she smiled, trembling with hope. For the first time, she saw that they were not alone. For the first time, she believed. The battle raged on, but the tide was turning. Soldiers stumbled under the villagers' fury. Some fell back, others shouted in panic. The human fought beside them, his strikes fierce, his presence unyielding. The commander raised his weapon, his voice breaking through the storm. "This is not over. You think you are free? You think one man and a mob of peasants can defeat us? I will return. I will burn this place to the ground." His words echoed, but they carried less weight than before. The villagers no longer bowed. They stood with fists raised, with voices shouting, with courage blazing. And at the center, the human still stood, bloodied but tall. He had lit a fire, and it was spreading. The turning point had come. The village square lay in ruins. Dust hung in the air. Broken weapons littered the ground, and groans of wounded soldiers echoed through the silence. The villagers stood together now, bloody, bruised, but standing tall. For the first time in years, they did not bow their heads. They did not hide their eyes. At the center of it all stood the human. His coat was torn, his body bleeding, his breath ragged. Yet he still stood tall, unshaken, like a wall of stone that no storm could break. The commander glared at him from across the square, fury burning in his eyes. Around him, only a handful of soldiers remained, their faces pale, their confidence broken. The rest lay scattered on the ground, defeated by a man they had mocked and a people they had once ruled with fear. The commander spat into the dust. "This changes nothing," he hissed. "You think one fight frees you? You think one man makes you strong? I will return with fire. I will return with armies. And when I do, none of you will remain." He gave a sharp signal. The surviving soldiers helped him retreat, their boots pounding as they fled into the shadows beyond the village. The square was silent again. Only the sound of heavy breathing, quiet sobs, and the crackle of torches filled the air. The villagers stared at the human, unsure if they were looking at a savior or a madman. The older sister stumbled forward, still clutching her little sibling. Tears streaked her dusty face, but her voice carried loud and clear. "You saved her." The human turned his head slowly. His eyes, weary but steady, met hers. For a moment he said nothing. Then in a low voice he answered, "No, we saved her." The girl blinked, confused. Around her, the villagers exchanged looks. Some lowered their heads in shame, remembering how long they had stayed silent. Others clenched their fists, remembering how it felt to finally stand. The human continued, his words heavy with meaning. "I fought because you would not. But when you chose to rise, they began to fall. Remember this. They are not strong because they fight. They are strong because you do not." The villagers listened, every word sinking into their hearts. His voice was not a command, it was a truth they could not deny. The older sister's tears fell again. She looked at her little sister. Safe now, alive, clinging tightly to her arm, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "You are only 3, and you live because he stood." The little girl looked up at the human with wide eyes, too young to understand, but already sensing the weight of what had happened. The human bent down for a moment, his scarred face close to hers, his voice softened just enough for her to hear. "Grow strong, grow free, never bow to fear." Then he rose again, his presence towering over the broken square. The villagers gathered closer. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others whispered, "Thanks." But the human did not smile, nor did he celebrate. His face was carved in stone, his eyes already looking beyond the village. One villager, his voice trembling, asked the question that burned in all their minds. "Why? Why did you help us, human? You owe us nothing." The man stood silent for a moment. The torches flickered in his tired eyes. Then he answered, simple and clear, "Because no one else would." The words cut deep into every heart. For the first time in years, the villagers felt not just gratitude, but shame. Shame that it had taken a stranger to do what they would not. shame that fear had ruled them for so long. But that shame became something else. A promise. A fire. The human turned away, his figure moving slowly toward the edge of the square. His body swayed with exhaustion, but his steps were steady. Every villager watched, silent, as if afraid that even a whisper might disturb the weight of the moment. The older sister called out, her voice breaking. "Wait, will you stay? Will you protect us?" The man paused. For a long moment he stood still. Then he shook his head slowly. "You must protect yourselves. I may fight a battle, but only you can win a war." His words left the air heavy. The villagers looked at one another, realizing the truth. They could no longer wait for saviors. They could no longer live in fear. The choice to stand or fall was theirs. The human walked on, disappearing into the shadows beyond the village. His figure faded, but his presence remained. His legacy would not vanish with him. The villagers stood together, breathing in silence. For the first time, they looked at each other not with fear, but with unity. The older sister held her little sibling tightly. She whispered through her tears, her voice filled with hope. "He gave us back our courage." And though the commander's threat still echoed in the distance, though war still loomed on the horizon, the village was no longer broken. Because one human had dared to stand, and because of him, they would never kneel again.